Good afternoon and welcome back to our webinar series that we are doing in conjunction with the Victorian Department of Education. It might be this evening or this morning, depending on when you are watching this particular webinar. If you have joined us for the previous webinars, you hopefully have seen the email follow-up and know that all of the webinars that we are doing, we have the link to them to be viewed at any time. They're all being streamed to YouTube, as you guys can see right now, and we keep them there forever. If you do join us live, we'd love for you to interact with us in the comments. So drop in something into the Q&A, say hello, let us know where you're from when you are watching live. And Jim and Chris really appreciate that ability to customize the content to make sure that we're addressing all of your questions this afternoon. So today we are going to be talking about one of my most, I'm most excited about this one almost of what you guys have done so far. Not that what you've done so far hasn't been awesome, Jim and Chris, but I love this concept that very timely that we have all spent quite an extended period of time inside physical walls over the last couple of months. And one of the awesome things about Google's tools is that we are able to explore the world, and Jim and Chris are going to take you through some of my all-time favorite Google tools and talk about that this afternoon. We will have a feedback form that we will share at the end. And thank you very much if you have joined us previously and have filled that in. It is really, really, truly valuable for us to get your feedback, and we really appreciate it. So when we share it, this is my upfront plea for you to please complete that this afternoon. All right. I don't think I need to talk anymore. I usually get in trouble from Jim and Chris for talking too much at the start and the end. So I'm going to hand over to this afternoon's hosts. We have Jim Sill from Deploy Learning and Chris Hart from Unstuck Learning Design. And we've seen some people joining in the chat. I recognize Joanna's name, and Tyra is just saying that she's been to all the webinars so far.
Yay!
You guys are brilliant. I'm pretty, I'll agree with that, Tyra. I think they're pretty all right too, which is why we keep inviting them back. Oh. All right. Enough from me. I'm going to take myself out of the stream and hand over to you, Jim and Chris, to take us beyond our physical walls. And I'm excited about the places we're going to explore together this afternoon.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks, Kimberly. I hope you're not being attacked by birds. That sounds
it was like a Hitchcock movie there. Just suddenly like, I'm really glad that we're wearing our t-shirts today, Jim. I noticed that the three of us are there, and Kimberly also has the same jacket on as in her profile photo, which is a beautiful jacket.
I did that on purpose, Chris. I had to come back just to tell you. I literally put that on purpose because it's like real life. It's like, wait, that's a real person on the screen.
That's
I can't go again now.
Right.
Okay,
Goodbye.
And I feel like I might be using a photo from like 10 years ago.
At least, a minimum. Anyway, before we get cracking with today's webinar, thank you again so much for coming and hanging out with us. We would like to just spend a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands plural, upon which we meet today, and to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And again, pay our respects to you and the fact that you're here with us, and it's just wonderful to be able to connect with so many educators. And thank you so much for dropping into the chat and saying hello. Our pals from Casey Fields are here. Maria Rosaria Costabile is here. Neville is here from Flemington. Tara is here from Geelong. So wonderful that we've got all of you here. And we do really acknowledge not just the fact you're with us this afternoon, but really acknowledge the fact that you have been doing such amazing work for your children and your colleagues and your communities and families over the past couple of months. We are going to definitely nerd out hugely this afternoon. We are excited about how nerdy this afternoon is, and really kind of helping us to step beyond those physical walls. Just a quick reminder there, Jim, I think. About teaching from home, which is now the worst name for a website ever. In fact, because we know lots of us aren't teaching from home now. But again, this is a great site to get lots and lots of ideas for distance learning or continuous learning. Heather's in as well. Brilliant. Heather's here with us. Will I just keep going, Jim?
Oh, do what you want to do.
I'll just keep rolling with this until we get to some maps, because Jim's getting very, very nervous about maps and excited at the same time. If you do still need some one-to-one support from your community, do remember that there is the ANZ GFE community.com site still available there if you want to have some support from Google trainers or innovators, which are the kind of Gemini. That's our tribe. There are people. This isn't an official Google service, but it is a service that's available from the community. If you have any particular questions around anything Google, please feel free to jump on there. All right, our agenda, James.
Yeah, look, I think we've got a lot of wonderful things to talk about. I was telling Chris, everybody, before this, I don't know if we have enough time, and I'm not sure we're going to finish on time anymore. I don't know why that's funny to me, but we never finish on time. So you should expect that by now, Heather, and everyone else who's here every week. But let's just talk a little bit about what's happening on this agenda. We're going to talk just a few things about this, your learning design principles, Chris, that I love when you share those things. And I think a lot of it's very relevant now that we're all heading back into the classroom. But we're going to start off with, I'm going to talk to you about Google Maps. I know a lot of people are going to do really know Google Maps from like, oh, how do I get to work on time? And but I'm going to share maybe some things in there that you haven't seen before that make it such a valuable tool. And then Chris, you're going to talk about MyMaps, and then I think you and I love MyMaps equally. We literally had to Rochambeau for that. You use that term, Rochambeau?
Never heard that in my entire life, but thank you.
And then I think you're going to roll into Google Earth and then Tour Creator, and we'll talk about my favorite thing that I need at least 2 hours to talk about, arts and culture. And we're really just going to talk about how do we just go beyond everything that we these four walls that we teach in, and really start exploring the world. And I think those are our passions, right, Chris?
Absolutely. And we're always keeping in mind when we're doing this, the learning design principles, like building strong connections, collaborating. And I think today, more than anything, the tools we're going to share with you are really about rich learning experiences. Taking learning outside of the classroom walls, and really looking at our planet as our playground. When we, as ever, we're thinking about learning growth and thinking in that online space as well. We will give a little nod to the high impact teaching strategies, although it did make me think that there's a kind of I think there might be one missing, Jim. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but I think there's one which could be missing, and it's about this idea of like, how do you make, so one of the high impact teaching strategies, in my opinion, should be, how do you make learning irresistible? Like, questioning and setting goals and worked example and all that stuff is really important. But like, how do you make it so that kids are connecting to the real world, that it's irresistibly relevant to their learning and to themselves, the learning that we design? So I think it's an interesting one for us to consider today, that we're going to use this technology to really, I hope, make the world their playground, and also to make it irresistible. And to do that, Jim, I think we're going to start with some Google Maps.
I want to go back to, what logo would you use for that, making learning irresistible?
Oh, what a great question.
But look, and I think maybe you're bringing you're setting a standard that maybe we're not going to be able to live up to for everybody. We'll probably see dropouts within the next 5 minutes. But,
no, we won't. We'll be fine.
Let's get into it, because let's see how we go, and we'll see how everybody feels as we move through this, and how irresistible will this become. So I want to talk, if you don't mind sharing my screen, I'm just going to open up Google Maps. So I have Google Maps just open up. So that's maps.google.com for those of you who have never used Google Maps. And I'm here in Melbourne, so I just wanted to, I'll start from here, okay? One of the things that I think is a very powerful tool, look, we all know how to zoom in, zoom out. That's great. Maybe you go up here and you search for, your house or something like that. But I want to share with you, if you right-click right off the start, so I'm just going to click here in Melbourne on the coast there, and I'm going to right-click, and then I'm going to choose measure distance. And as soon as I do that, I get, I'm going to get rid of this thing, and then I just click again, and you get this line. And I love this because now I down here on the bottom, it'll tell me, if I'm here in Australia, it'll tell me the distance in kilometers and the miles in parentheses. But if I'm in the US, it does the exact opposite. And what's really cool is like, oh, that's amazing that Port Phillip Bay is that long. And maybe you did or didn't know that. But then if I keep clicking, I can continue to add these points. And if I go back to the original point, I click that, and now suddenly I have the total area. And you can see that down on the bottom of the screen when you do that. And that is one of my favorite tools. It's to bring in some maths involved in this. You know, we can look at right angles. We can guess what the distance is between you know, these areas or whatever it is. And I love this because, Chris, if you go out and you go around the world and you find objects that you know are circles, you know, just for example, like sports stadiums or something like that, you can then measure across a stadium, and then have your kids working on circumference. And I may be way beyond my my knowledge of maths to go any further than that, but it's I love this tool. And like, for example, Chris, this may be something you've done in the past. If you head over here to the other side of the planet, let's see if my computer will play with me with this. If I go over here to the other side where you are from, and then I zoom into this channel, right? And so as we start to relate world like history, or if we just think to ourselves, how many people swam across the channel? I can click here, measure this distance, and then and tick here, and then start to guess, like, well, how fast you have to swim to make it in this amount of time, right? So looking at those kind of things can be really cool and really powerful. Thinking about distance traveled from you know, colonizing explorers or anything like that. So anyways, I love that. That's all I feel like I want to share, but there's so much more. Okay, so let's talk about a couple other things. So you saw when I zoomed out here that this Earth became round, which, you know, maybe disproves some current theories, mostly in the United States. But if I click on this and then I go over here to the satellite view and I click on that, this just really becomes very cool. And then let me see if I can do this correctly. If I zoom out, eventually, there it is. We get real-time cloud data. This effect, it's real-time cloud data. It doesn't, you won't see it move exactly because it's sort of refreshed. And so we can come over here, and I know, for example, my father lives right here on the coast of the US, and there's a tropical storm that's sort of showing up. But when we look around and we look at these weather these weather patterns that we hear about, cyclones or whatever it might be, we can come in and then find them and then use that distance measuring tool to determine how far it is from landfall. And then guess if it's going to, you know, we look at these predictions that the media puts out. We can maybe guesstimate how fast to think these storms are moving. One of my favorites, that's that cloud data. So you can just look around and even start to think about, you know, the way air currents moving and all things like that. Not that I know any more about science than that. So while we're out here, if I keep zooming, watch, I'm going to keep zooming out. You see how the Earth just went into a shade? And I can come over here, ignore this stuff on the side, because that's what I'm going to show you next. But if I start moving this around, and we can start looking at the way, like, you know, for example, my kids, when they talk to grandpa, they're like, why is it dark there when it's light here? And so we can talk about the Earth's relationship to the sun. And then if you really start thinking about it, you can come over here and start looking at population data. You can start making guesstimates around population data. So as you start to look at the dark side of the Earth, you can sort of make those estimates about what are the most populous places. Look at South America. I don't know how well you can see it on your screen, but South America, mostly dark there in the middle, and we can make guesses about what that is and why, right? But a lot, very bright around the edges. Okay, so one of my favorites. So then the next thing I want to show you is when we're in this far out, that the stuff that appeared off to the side. So as soon as you get far enough out, you have the option of changing your view or whatever round ball that exists in space to, like here, for example, the moon. And now I'm on the moon. And then we can quietly sing Pink Floyd songs to ourselves as we move the moon around. But we can ultimately see how it relates to the sun. But you won't see, for example, you probably won't see Earth in the background. So don't bother looking, because as I've been told, the star data that you see in the background is not necessarily accurate. So just be thinking about that. But there's so many amazing things. I'm actually curious what happens when I click on the International Space Station. Can you humor me?
Yeah, I think it's a view from the cupola, isn't it? Yeah. Look at that.
Look at this, 360-degree view inside the space station. Okay, so I know many of you are thinking to yourselves, like, that's it, Jim, I can't take anymore. I know many of you are thinking to yourselves, like, that's it, Jim, I can't take anymore. This is, I know, Chris, you're actually very interested. Can you just wait there, Jim? I just want to look at the it's just so cool. Don't forget, you have to come back to Earth. So, and so you just have to come back and pick Earth from your list of things, and then come back here and visit Earth again. Anyways,
so in terms of all those planets, Jim, as well, you can zoom in really close, and you can. The Mars rover data is in there as well. The Mars rover photographs on Mars, and such an exciting, incredible data source, an incredible place to start.
It really is, and who knew it was there, right? Like it's really have to sort of dig in and play around until you can find it. Anyways, I think that when we most of us just look at the Earth from this view, the map view. And usually we either stick with the flat sort of surface, but I love that satellite view for a lot of reasons. Let's just talk a little bit about places. So as we're sort of working our way around the world, and we find maybe we're reading text in our classrooms. Maybe obviously humanities. We have world wars. We have all sorts of different things that we can look at when it comes to the Earth. But I think more importantly is when we're looking around when we're reading text. So, for example, if you're teaching secondary, you might maybe reading the Kite Runner, right? And the Kite Runner is in what city? Do you know, Chris? Based on what?
I think it's Kabul.
It is Kabul. So I can head over to Afghanistan and to Kabul, and here we have access to this region. So I know there's, being American, it's a bit vulnerable to kind of talk about, like, when we in America, you're constantly bombarded with visions and media information about what Afghanistan is, right? And I think it's really amazing when we can read texts that sort of give us a different perspective. And when we do that, we can actually come into Google Maps, like in a place like this, and then and come down here to the bottom, and then let me close this window there. And once I close that window, you get this carousel that pops up down here. Do you see that? And most everybody doesn't really go there, but when I zoom into a place like Kabul and I tick on this chevrons and it comes up, we have this incredible picture of the view that we have right now, right? And I can zoom in. The more I zoom in, the more these images will change, okay? And we can start to explore place based on the view of other people. And so other people around the world they go, well, for example, Google hasn't really gone here, right? You don't have any street view or anything, and I'll show that in a second. And so what ends up happening here is that we have these images that we rely on other people sharing. And so as I scroll through this carousel, I could, you see how when I'm hovering over it, it points to where the place is. And then I can come in here and just get a better sense for what that looks like. So I'm going to click on one just randomly. And here we have this beautiful image of Kabul, and which, by the way, goes against the image that I have burned into my head about what I'm supposed to think Kabul looks like. And it's very fascinating to me to visit places that I may or may not that I might hold bias for, right, or bias about. And so I can come in here and challenge myself and challenge my students and each other and all those great things about what a place is that I think it is, right? So in that Kite Runner, the main character is from this section here in Kabul. And so we can explore even more, right? The more I zoom in, the more that carousel incorporates the view, right? So as I zoom even more, that carousel will change to incorporate the view. And this can be really fascinating when I move beyond this carousel. And by the way, you can see that that's an image and that's an image. You can just look at the icons and get a sense. In some places, you'll see 360-degree imagery. And so I'm going to drop this chevrons down, and I'm going to pick Pegman off of his perch. You know, he's just down there sitting around, and I can grab him off his perch and drag him around, right? Now, when I drag Pegman off his perch in this view, I normally you would see lines, blue lines. You know what I'm talking about, Chris?
Yep.
And those blue lines is Google's Street View. Whereas in this situation, I'm only seeing circles. So those circles, did not mean to go that far. The circles are, you see, I don't know how well you can see them on the screen, but there's these 3 little blue circles right here. And if I drop Pegman on one of those circles, here's a view. And this is a 360-degree view from this person up here in the corner. You can see their name up there in the corner. And then I can come in here and look, and I can just sort of take a peek. Here are 2 friends having a conversation. Is this the kite runner? We can look at this and sort of make, I don't know. I don't know if we want to use the word judgment, but we can sort of look, what do I think I know? What do I think what do I want to know? And really look around. And by the way, you see this shadow here on the ground? That's the dude taking the picture. And so I can look around and look at the sandy, and I can look at see the dirt in the air. So high populous sandy areas, and then I can make these incredible assumptions. We always have to check those assumptions against bias. But we always
Jim, when we've used in the past, we've talked about that. See, think, wonder. Like, what do you see? What do you think's happening? What does it make you wonder about more generally? Like, what an amazing interactive, immersive way to actually do one of those thinking routines using a street view image.
Absolutely, and I love it. There's actually there's a high school there. There's an intersection here, and I love this intersection because I can look around and I would see this on any street corner, right? I would see just somebody selling fruits, and then as we look in the background, we can see this is a butcher of some sort in the background, and then here there's chickens, and then we get a real sense for what life might be like in that part of town, right? We'd want to compare that to other parts of town.
And can I just ask you everyone to do me a favor, is if you find a photosphere that you love, that you really, really love, is just copy and paste somewhere the URL to that photosphere. Because when we get later on into Tour Creator, then we can actually use some of these photospheres to create content as well. So it's a really useful, it's a fantastic tool.
That link up here, Chris, that's the link you want to copy. It's really long. It's really long, so it doesn't necessarily belong in the chat. But you could maybe post it off on a Google Doc somewhere and just hold on to it because Chris is going to want you to use that later. So I'm going to get out of here. I just want to share another example of what this might look like, and I'm going to head to one of our favorite places, the Colosseum of Rome, right? And so I'm just going to head over to the Colosseum of Rome, and here. I'm in this view. By the way, Colosseum's temporarily closed, just in case you were on your way over there this afternoon. And then here, I could do a couple things, right? So one, I could zoom in, and I could even drop Pegman here. And we'll talk about that. See, those are the blue lines. Those blue lines, that's the Street View car that drives around. But I'm going to put Pegman back because I quickly want to show you when I go to satellite view of the Colosseum. And then I zoom down. I'm just going to zoom down. You'll see, as long as that 3D button is on over there, you'll see that I'm going to hold down on my Chromebook. I'm going to hold down the Control key, and I'm just going to click and drag, right? I'm just going to click and drag. And now I've got this incredible view of the Colosseum. And we can turn and then look at the Roman, the Forum, and we can just look around and just get a sense for the magnitude of the Colosseum and how it sits, in my opinion, so awkwardly in modern times, right? And it's just such a powerful place to take a look at. In all this is in 3D, and so and it looks so normal, doesn't it? It doesn't look like some computer generated stuff. And think about how you might do that around other places, other incredible sites around the world. I'm going to head back to map quickly. And then I'm just going to drop Pegman down. And we know if I drop Pegman down, by the way, the Colosseum is so loaded. Did I not go back to map yet? Hold on one second. I just want to go back to the map. It's easier to see when you have the map view. There we go. The Colosseum is so loaded with tourists, and everybody and their friends are uploading 360 images. So you just want to be careful where you drop Pegman. So I'm going to take Pegman. I'm just going to drop him in that line inside the Colosseum because remember it's closed. And I'm going to drop in, and now I'm in the Colosseum. Now I didn't drop Pegman on Google Street View. I dropped it on somebody referring to themselves as chicken snot. So I'm just going to get out of that. Try one more time. And I love
I love live demos, Jim. Live demos. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna see if I can take. All right, come on, Pegman. Don't quit on me now. It's done. Maybe I should be done.
He's fallen over with laughter.
It's literally frozen. So I'm just gonna refresh my page. Anyways, you can drop Pegman into the Coliseum because the Coliseum has had Street View go around inside it, and I think it's so great. What has happened? We haven't even talked about the internet today, and look what it's already happening. Sorry, just two seconds. Then just fast forward this if you're at home watching this recording, and I might be out.
Are we all right? That's all right. I think you were almost done anyway, right?
I was, but I had something really cool to show you, and I don't really know if I want to give it up yet.
Well, don't give it up.
Yeah. What do you think is happening?
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I don't want to come back. I really want to show it. I refuse to change. All right, over to you, Chris, and I'll come back and show you something else later.
Well, if you can be working on that in the background, my friend, then what I'm going to do is show you a couple of things. We're actually going to go from moving away from Google Maps, which is the kind of centralized place of data in terms of maps and like photospheres and Street View and all that. And we're going to look at creating some of our own maps. So what people often don't realize is that in Drive, when we click on New, you see the list of like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides. And oftentimes we don't click on the More button. Like there is definitely more. There's tons more. And one of the wonderful tools that are in here are actually Google MyMaps. So while that just loads up, let me just explain that Google MyMaps is a collaborative mapping tool which brings all of the data in from Google Maps into MyMaps. It is collaborative, i.e. We can work on it together in exactly the same way as I would share a Google Doc. I will press share here. It does need to have a title, test webinar map. I don't need a description. And I can then share this to teacher. Oops, I can't spell teacher though. Teacher at Deploy Learning. So my very good friend. And I can make the teacher at Deploy Learning an editor on this map as well. Now, the only difference between Google Docs and Google MyMaps in terms of the collaboration is you won't see it live in exactly the same way as you see a document. So when Jim and I are working together in a doc, we'll actually see each other typing away. In a Google MyMap, it'll refresh from time to time. And if you want to force view any updates anyone else has done, then you do need to refresh your map to see that, okay? So but essentially what we've got here is a map of the world. It is a projected map of the world using Mercator projection. We can change things like Jim did before. We can look at things like straight up maps. We can look at satellite maps. So that brings in a totally different view. We might look at terrain, for example. That brings in another type of map here, which is much more like a, a globe, like a physical globe, being able to look at the different terrain we've got here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it for the moment on a satellite view, because that's my favorite view. Now, what I want you to think about, there are lots of similarities between what Jim's just showing you in Google Maps and what you can do in Google My Maps. But this is definitely about creating content now. So some of the case uses we're going to talk about are certainly hopefully of use to you. Actually, let's make it live. Casey Fields Primary School. I'm giving you a maths activity for next week, guys. I am sure, I don't even know, it's such a new build. I assume it maybe is built here on this piece of land, because I think it's a brand new build, right? So we might look for a school, we might look for our own school. And in fact, one of the things that I used to love doing when I was at school was those trundle wheels. I don't know if do you know what I mean by a trundle wheel, Jim? So it's like a wheel on a stick that you trundle it along, and it measures, right? So it clicks over.
Right.
And so often in primary schools, you go out and you would measure area and perimeter using a trundle wheel. And in the same way Jim did before is if I wanted to add a line or a shape, just clicking up here, add a line or a shape, I can actually do my trundle wheeling, because I think you should always, still do your physical trundle wheeling, and then actually use Google Maps to compare, Google My Maps to compare and contrast. So when I complete the polygon, so this might be the school area.
So Chris, as you're doing that, when I showed it, it doesn't save, right? And so you can just quickly do a measurement, but if you want to keep it and you want to show it in a different way, this is the right way to do it.
Absolutely. So there is a ruler tool, but the ruler won't save, as Jim says. If you use this tool to draw a line or a polygon, that will save, because then I can save it. And if I save it, I know that it's 13.6 hectares in area, no idea what that is, and 1.46 kilometers. Now, if you remember webinar 1, Jim showed you how to convert units using Google search. I can change the color of it, so I might make it yellow. I can keep it transparent enough, or I could even fill it in fully, but I can keep it transparent enough to see what's under there. Let's give it a little bit of a bigger border. And the other thing I can do is I can actually write stuff in here as well. So I could actually talk about, today we went out to measure, sorry, my typing is not great at the moment, the perimeter and area, yada, 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 yada. So we've got all of that. Oh, I'm actually measuring the community ovals too, around the back. Well, there we go. And I can even, so let me just save that. I can even add in a photo. Now I can add in my own photos from my photographs if I've taken them, or you can use Google Drive. I can use my web camera, or I might do a Google image search. So if I did Casey Fields primary, let's see if a photo comes up. That looks like a really excellent photo here. Oh, I'm not sure this is the right place, but let's do it anyway. Oh, there's a Minecraft photo. Casey Fields in Minecraft. So I can add in photographs in here as well. I can add in several and make a slideshow. So students can actually be creating maps which tell a little bit of a story. They can look at measurement and that kind of stuff, but actually really bring it in. They can insert videos from YouTube. There is some talk of getting videos from Google Drive, but I still think that's not quite working yet. But you can insert videos from YouTube. But if you imagine, for example, you wanted to tell the story of Little Red Riding Hood, you were exploring nursery rhymes or fairy tales, you can actually give markers to different students and say, what would happen if we were going through Warburton was indeed where we started telling the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And so we can actually, oops, sorry, I deleted that, undo. Is we can start with Little Red Riding Hood. And just a tip, you could do this collaboratively as a class, like each class writes its own paragraph about Little Red Riding Hood, but places it in Melbourne or places it in Sydney or places it wherever you might want it to be. And each student, each group creates a little paragraph. One useful piece is actually to number your titles, because what you're going to see in a second is as I save each of these points, I get them, they're appearing on this little menu at the bottom. And what that means is that I could actually read a story in order. So I could click on each of these and it'll take me to the right place, and it'll give me, take me through the story in a map. Or if I wanted to be a little bit more kind of random about that, I could actually click on the places and read the story via places rather than reading it in chronological order, which is just a different way to approach looking at something like a narrative. So I'm just going to delete this layer. So one of the things is worth knowing is that in MyMaps we have layers. So we're able to create layers upon layers upon layers. And what I'm going to do is just to show you really quickly, I've got two things to show you on MyMaps. There's about a zillion things you can do, but I'm going to show you two of them. One of them is the following. If you were to go out and to do a web search and you looked for, I did a web search which was volcanoes of the world in tables. Okay, so what I wanted to do was to get all of the volcanoes in the world, and I found them on this website, so the volcano at oregonstate.edu. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to select this table of data. So what I've done is I found a list of all the volcanoes, all gazillion volcanoes. Oh wow, there's lots.
Go on for a while.
So many, so many. So I've got all of these. I'm copying, so I'm Control+C on my Chromebook. And I'm going to do that little thing where I'm going to do sheets.new because I want to open up a new spreadsheet. And so into that spreadsheet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste my data. So bear with me because you're like, I thought we were doing maps. Why are we doing spreadsheets now? So what we're going to do is we've got a bunch of data now, and I'm just going to call this volcanoes. We've got a bunch of data here, and each of the columns has a name. So volcano name, the country it's in, the type of volcano it is, the latitude and longitude, and even the elevation. So this is a really great piece of data, and you can sort them, and I could look at what's the tallest, and obviously if it's got a negative elevation, it means it's an underwater volcano, like it's below ground level. So lots of stuff you could do with spreadsheets. So if you want to do some awesome work with kids on spreadsheets, you could actually analyze this data a little bit more. But what I'm going to do is jump back into my maps here, and I'm going to import that data. And what that allows me to do is if I go to Google Drive, I'm actually going to take this spreadsheet, and I'm going to take the data out of the spreadsheet, and I'm going to put it into the map. So if I go to Recent, and then I'm going to choose my volcanoes. And what it's doing is it's pulling that data in, but it needs me to help it to say where should I put the data. And what it says is choose columns to position your place marks. Now, because in this spreadsheet I've got latitude and longitude, I can actually use very, very precise latitudes and longitudes. If it was the name of cities, if it was the name of countries, it would put a marker in the middle of that country. If it was the name of a city, it would drop a marker in the middle of the city. We used to use this in a school I worked in, where we actually had our students actually travel, because it was a specialist school, our students traveled in from quite far away. So we actually created a map using the data we had so that we knew where they were traveling from. So you can put all kinds of data into this via a spreadsheet. I'm then going to say, we'll just call each of the markers by its name. And what's going to happen is it's magically looking at the longitude and latitude of all of this data from the spreadsheet, and it's just taking a deep breath, and then it's going to plonk all of that data onto the table. So now what I've got is a map of all of those volcanoes. And when I go onto one of the pointers, it'll actually tell me the name of the volcano. It'll tell me what country it's in. This one's in Hawaii. There's some in the volcano fields in Australia. I'm not sure where that is. Part of Australia. Interesting. The stratovolcanoes. I can see all these volcanoes. I can also click on the little paint bucket here, and I might make them red because that makes me feel like they're a little bit more volcano-y. But I can also even choose more icons. And as you all know, there are a bunch of map icons out there. There are some for crises, and this is the volcano crisis icon. So if I click on that icon, I've now got all of my volcanoes have got this icon. Now that's cool. It's interesting. But in terms of science, if I'm talking to kids about where volcanoes actually appear, and I'm talking about destructive margins and constructive margins, and this thing called the Ring of Fire, which runs around the Pacific. Suddenly, if I just click on this little tick box up here next to volcanoes, I can turn off the that layer. I can talk to the kids about, well, look, we can actually see around here all of these destructive margins, which are happening around here. And what we can hypothesize is that a lot of volcanoes are going to appear on those margins. You turn back on your volcanoes, and boom, we've kind of got a really powerful visual of that. So there are so many things you could do.
That's all we have for you today. That's all we need.
And we're done. And that's it. I do have one more, and this is my. Can you remember when I used to do this, Jim? I don't know. Is my what do you call it? My mic drop moments. Demo slam. I used to do this as my demo slam back in the day. So we used to do things at conferences a lot where we would share something cool. So what I'm going to do is do a terrible job right now. Normally I'd zoom in and do this more carefully, but I'm going to do a terrible job of going around Australia. I think I've just cut Tasmania out. Anyone who is from Tasmania, I can only apologize. I'm just doing this quickly because we're running out of time. I've created a polygon of Australia, so I could get the kids to guesstimate the perimeter and the area of Australia. According to my version of Australia, it's 8,610,240 kilometers squared is the area, and 12,186 kilometers in perimeter. That's awesome. I'm just going to make it yellow so it's nice and visible. Now, what I say to when I do this, when I talk to kids about it, is but look at Greenland. Look how they ironically named Greenland up here. Look how much bigger it is. And we say, well, can we guess how much bigger it is? Well, it looks probably at least twice as big. And I'm like, okay, let's test that hypothesis. So you can pick up your polygon, which as we remember is the shape of Australia, and we can take it to Africa. And we say, well, look at the size of Africa compared to Australia. Or look at Brazil. They're kind of similar. But then something really weird happens because this is a flat version of a three-dimensional object or almost a sphere being flattened out. The top and the bottom gets really distorted. So if I was to take Australia up to Greenland, which if you remember is near the top, something weird happens. And that distortion, the way we flatten the map, gets looked at by Google and says, well, actually, if Australia were up there, this is what it would look like on a flattened version of the globe. So in fact, we actually know that Greenland is not twice as big as Australia in any way, shape, or form. It's in fact, geez, I'm cutting so much off here. I'm even going to cut the top of that off. It's in fact significantly smaller, and we can do the reverse of this and pick up Greenland and take it down to Australia. It's like, what? It's tiny. So tons of stuff. And again, we're getting overexcited, Jim. Tons of stuff that we can do with MyMaps there.
You know, can I add a couple of things to that? That when you did the volcano thing, you know, you can still add images to that. So you could front load your lesson with you bringing in that data, and then having your kids go in and identify certain places and adding pictures from a web search in there to just sort of claim or show what that area looks like. And what I love about the balloons, as they're called, when you can also click on them and then access your web camera, so kids could put their face in as a pin for those balloons, and then and they could claim places for themselves, right? I really love it.
I need to upgrade my Flash player.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I didn't know it means
cancel, please.
But, it is some really powerful things that you can do with that. And I'll tell you, Chris, I'll just mention that I worked with a teacher out of Sydney, a primary school teacher, and she used to have her students, like every week, a new kid would be able to go and pick a country in the world from the map and drop a pin there, and then create a balloon with text that says how to say good morning in that language of that country. And then the kid would take a Google Translate link and drop it in that pin. And every week they would say good morning as the start of the day using that country's language. And
so cool.
Yeah, and by the end of the year, there's a whole map of pins from around the world, and in learning new languages and just understanding culture, right? Understanding the subtle nuances that make people different.
When I was teaching Year 12 French, we did La Francophonie, which is kind of all the French-speaking countries including France, but outside of France. And so we did all this research into like soccer players and famous people and artists and stuff. And the students did their own research, created their own little video. They were Year 12, so they put it onto YouTube, created their own video in French, and then they put all of those videos in there. And because it's Google Doc, I can also set it down, if I go back into share, to say that anyone with a link can view this map. And what that means is you can do it, like you can embed it into a website, a front-facing website. You can share it with your school community via your own website, or even directly via the link. So much powerful collaboration able to happen in there as well.
Well, just thinking about like creating up marketing, making a video about a fictitious place, and then finding a place in the world and dropping a pin, embedding that video. It can be so cool. And I think Google Maps, MyMaps, was really the thing to use for a long time. And then I think what ended up coming out, they redesigned Google Earth. And that really takes it to a whole another level, I think, with what you're about to show.
So let's briefly look at that. So Google Earth was totally rebuilt a few years ago, like 3.5, 4 years ago, because ironically, it wasn't a web-based product. Like most Google products are web-based. The original Earth is a download and a program that runs, and people have been using that for many years, and incredible. But what the team did was they decided to rebuild it for Chrome as a browser and also as an app. So if you're using other products like iPads and things, you can download the Google Earth app and you have access to all of this. But otherwise, it works in any browser. If I just launch it right now, I'm just going to show you a few little bits of this. This is an evolving product, and Jim and I are lucky to be on the Google Earth kind of advisory team type people, the Google Earth education experts, and have seen this develop and seen the incredible work that the teams have been doing in the background. And what Google Earth is doing is kind of, there's a bit of mashing across from Google Maps into MyMaps and now into Google Earth, which is just taking its time a little bit to load. Maybe the internet's on strike today.
Only during our work.
Only during our webinars, right? But one of the things that which has blown my mind is the collaboration between Google and the ability and the collaboration between Google and people like the BBC or National Geographic and a few other different kind of companies to create content that goes into there. Okay. Jim, I've lost your visual. Are you good? I thought it was me. I thought I'd offended you. Obviously, we've tested all of these things before we came online, and they're just deciding to have a little bit of a moment, which has never happened in any of our classrooms ever. All right, I'll give this one more chance, and then I'm going to jump back. Here we go. Jim's back in.
It's amazing what's happening today.
I don't know, man. I think everyone's just given up. All right, so I tell you what we might do is Jim, do you want to see if you can get Earth up and running?
Yeah, I'm gonna go there right now, and let's see if I can do that.
Maybe the team at Google Earth are having one of those, like, we're having a downtime between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in American time. So
mine's pausing on that as well, Chris. Let's just skip. Let's just
skip it. All right, so we'll come back to that if we can, but there is a brilliant thing which I will share with you, is this, which I'll put into the chat in a second. It is slightly out of date. It's waiting to be updated. But what this is a direct link to all of the voyages that have been created. So like if you want to look at volcanoes, if you want to look at Jane Goodall's work, if you want to look at Midsummer Night's Dream, you've got all of these amazing content pieces that have been built by professional companies and put into Google Earth. So if you want to look at something like Bram Stoker's Dracula, I just saw that there. This is a direct link, so this probably isn't going to work either. If it might actually. No, it's not. If Google Earth's having a moment. But what we've got here are direct links to all of these really fascinating voyages. But as you scroll along to the right, most of them, not all of them, but genuinely most of them have been translated professionally. So if you wanted to do something in French, or you want to do something in German, or you wanted to use a Spanish one or an Italian one, I think there's also Portuguese, Japanese. All of those voyages are there.
I have it. I'm up now. So if you want to share my screen, you can see it.
Awesome. That would be cool.
So so this is when we get to Google Earth, inside of Google Earth here, off to the side, you can search Google Earth just like we did with Maps and MyMaps. But under here, you see this little, what do they call that? Like a steering wheel?
It's a ship's wheel, yeah.
Yeah. So
steering wheel for a boat. I love it.
So if we go in here, the editor's picks, who knows who picks those, but you remember the movie, what's it called, Home?
No, it's called Lion.
Lion, there you go. Thank you. And it's great because here's this whole Voyager around that. And you can see there's a number of different ones you can get to. And Chris was just sharing that link to that site that has all of them. And you could just scroll through and just sort of like here's castles. So we can look at that, and it just takes us over. And what's nice is you get these little windows that pop up off to the side, and you can start to go through them. So if I click on one of these chateaus, you'll get this beautiful voyage, or this little trip that you can take. Yeah, it's really great just to be able to access those.
So, I mean, they're incredible. There's a huge bunch of them. One of the complaints which I vociferously make every time we talk to any of the team is the searchability of them isn't great. So actually finding those voyages is really tricky. That's why the spreadsheet, which I think should be coming into the live comments, if it isn't already, it's coming your way. I've just dropped down to our private. Yep, here we go. Thank you very much, Jeannie. So there's a link in there to the spreadsheet, which has got all of those in there. And then within that spreadsheet, you can search for keywords. But they're incredible. They're absolutely amazing. Have you got the games? If you got games, Jim.
Let me see what we get out of this. 1 second.
Yeah. So go back. No, sorry. Go back into Voyager. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And then.
No requests, please.
Yeah. Maybe I'll stop asking for things and click on games. I sent this one to my nephew. I've been working. He's back in England, and I've been doing some stuff with him through Google Classroom. If you just scroll down a little bit, there's Carmen Sandiego. And it's an awesome kind of Getting Around the World game this year's, where on Google Earth it's Carmen San Diego, and it's a bunch of like you have to solve the clues, and it takes you on different places around the Earth, and it's absolutely just brilliant content which has been brought together by Google, the Google Earth team, and a bunch of other developers. So, I mean, we're not going to go through all of these things, but just trust us when we say it is absolutely phenomenal, the kind of content that's in there. And a little bit, I'm sure Jim's going to say this later on about arts and culture. So there's so much content that you kind of need to remember to save those URLs and bookmark different ones that you know what you like. And have you got any projects, Jim? I was going to show my projects, but also
not on this account, Chris. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to be the one to show it. But
that's okay.
But you can go in and a lot of what you're seeing there, you can create yourself.
Yeah.
And so I love it. And you can see there's this great, like just introductory videos on how to go into this. But you can, watch tutorial on it, and then you can open up ones that are out there. Can you open up ones from the saved? Look at this. You can open up KML. You know what KML stands for?
I do.
Keyhole markup language. I'll just steal that from
markup language.
But that's what they used to call it before they bought this Google Earth from this old company. Keyhole. Yeah, something like that. And it's anyways, it's really it's great. You can actually import things from Drive. You can download. You can literally go and search Google for file type :KML or KMZ, and import it into Google Drive, into Maps or Marketplace.
George, if I have just shared from my other account, my screen. If you can show that, I've managed to get it up because I do have one ready for us.
Cool.
No, sorry, Georgia, the other me, the one that's not called demo. Yes, thank you so much. So what that is, what you can see there are these projects, and so you can create projects yourselves. There are a bunch of them who are created by, what's Jerome's surname? I've just totally forgotten. It's just totally blanked.
Jerome Berg, who has the Google Lit Trips.
And you can get hold of the lit trips he's made. They're a really nice example of what you can do. And this one is about the novel Night, which is about the concentration camps during the Second World War. And my son was actually studying this. He's in year 10. He was studying it in literature, or in English, I think. And I found this lit trip that was there. And essentially what Jerome's done is he's built a lot of these awesome, powerful trips, and you can build these too. So this is just a full screen image and with some text on it. Then it takes you to a little bit of an intro, but then he's put markers in, and as you drop into the markers, it gives you a lot of information. But what he does, which I love as well, you can hyperlink out to other things, but he gives like thinking questions and getting people to reflect on what's happening in the story. So this is, I couldn't remember the name of the author, which is terrible, but Eli Wiesel. It's the story of him and his time in the concentration camps, and incredibly powerful. But it will fly you off to different parts of the world, and you can go and explore literature using these trips and learning in situ. And so that's available in Google Lit Trips. And also, I think what I love about that is that you can inspire the students to through that. But you can also get the students to make it. And it is so easy. They're so easy to make. You can drop in like a full screen slide. You drop in a line or a place mark, and that's about it. Really Chris, powerful.
Years ago, I followed this blog of this 20-something-year-old kid who ran from France to Athens. And he ran every day. And I couldn't keep up with the blog and understand where he was because he was in these obscure little towns. So I learned Google Earth just to keep track of where he was.
Wow.
And it was just such a fun way. And imagine reading like a literature and being able to say, okay, it's probably important that we understand where this takes place. So why don't we go ahead and do that and build something in order to follow along each time. So every time this kid posted, I was like, oh, new marker. And I would go and I'd add text from his blog just to play around with it. And people were like, oh, Jim, did you share that with the guy? And I was like, no way, that's so creepy.
Because you're stalking him, essentially, right? So I'm going to do a really, really quick 5 minutes before we go into arts and culture, just on another tool. And George, if that's okay, if we can just switch over to my demo screen, that would be awesome. So we're just multitasking off like 17 different computers here.
Doing such a great job.
So Google Expeditions, which came out a number of years ago, and lots of people kind of have had that experience of using cardboard or VR viewers. Google Expeditions is a bunch of expeditions, kind of immersive 360 images, which were wonderful. And my complaint was always like, that's brilliant, but why can't kids make them? Like, I want kids to be able to make these things. And then probably about 2 years ago, well, maybe a little bit less actually, Tour Creator came out. So this is part of you can access this with your G Suite account. And essentially what Tour Creator does is it allows you to make your own immersive 360 tours. If you don't have, actually I've got, oh, they're over there, I can't reach them, they're on my shelf over there. If you don't have Google Cardboard, like you don't have VR viewers, you can still make these because they're still immersive on a screen in a browser. And if you're using something like a tablet, then you can actually still get a really wonderful experience. Even though it's not the 360 using a telephone and kind of in your face, you can still create some wonderful pieces. And what Tour Creator does is really, really simply allows you to create some beautiful 360 immersive tours. And what I've got is my, in fact, our friend, you know Donnie very, very well as well, Donnie Piercy from the US. He made a bunch of these little videos which tell you how to make Tour Creator tutorials. And so what I did is I just, oh, it's the wrong one actually, I'll move that one, but I'll put this into the chat in a moment. And Donnie he doesn't actually talk. It hasn't got his voice in them, but they take you through how to build a Tour Creator. And I'm going to show you in like 3 minutes how to do it. The one thing I did add for Donnie was on this page, which is a template. If you click on this template, it will give you a Google slide template. And I'm going to tell you about that in a second, exactly what that is for. So essentially, let's just have a look at Tour Creator. I built a few of them. I built them when I was working with schools in Papua New Guinea last year. I went around and actually took some 360 images myself and uploaded my 360 images into a tour and was able to create a tour that way. You don't have to have a 360 camera to be able to use Tour Creator. So for example, I went in and you can actually see my gray hair on top of, if I actually move this around. So this was the assembly I went into. And there's me taking the photo with a big cheesy grin. So I took these photos, but the other thing I did was I recorded the school song when they were singing in assembly. And what I was able to do was actually put that audio into, you're probably not going to get that, but I was put the audio into the tour so that when you go in to see this assembly and you look around, you actually get everyone singing the singing the school assembly. One of the other things that I did was I interviewed a lot of students, and we're going to have a chat in a second about how else you could use this, but I interviewed a bunch of students around why they chose science. So I took a photo. This is one of the science rooms. So, I mean, Papua New Guinean people are some of the most wonderful people I've ever met, and the schools are incredible. They often don't have the greatest of resources, and this was one of the real areas of pride was this science room. It has running water and stuff like that. So it was amazing. But I interviewed students as to why they chose science. So, for example, I interviewed Ludwig. Why did he choose science? And when I took that photo of him, I popped the photo in there, and I also embedded my interview audio of Ludwig. So you can kind of go and visit these students, and you can see and hear from them why they chose science. And it was incredibly moving, actually. You know, this young lady chose science because she wanted to be a nurse because she was so far. The nearest clinic to her village was about a 4-hour drive. So she went to this school because she wants to become a doctor so she can set up a clinic in her village. So, we can capture amazing stories through Tour Creator. And I'm going to show you in like 10 seconds how quick it is. I've just got a really quick test here, webinar test. I'm going to add a scene. I can find a scene within Street View. So I might look for like Eiffel Tower, let's say. And again, we're going to give you the link to this site, which will then allow you to kind of go through this at your own pace. But again, like Jim showed you before, I've got Peggy, and I can move Peggy around and drop on a sphere or drop on a Street View. And I can get different, this is at night, the Eiffel Tower at night. So love this, I'm going to use it. Actually, I don't love that, it's rubbish. Let's do that one instead. I'm going to, right, this is cool. I'm going to add this scene. So I add the scene. Jim, you can really tell the ones which have been done with a phone, like kind of like around like that. They've been kind of stitched together a little bit. So you can see like there's half a person who's moved a bit when people have been taking these photos. That means it's probably done in panorama mode in your phone, as opposed to using a 360 camera. But once I'm there, so I've got Eiffel Tower, I can do things like I can add a point of interest. And adding a point of interest is as simple as moving this thing around. And then I can add a photograph to it or an image overlay. So I can select an image and pop any JPEG image or PNG image into there. I can add on-site narration. So I can add an audio file into there so that when you move around using your cardboard viewer or your iPad or you're just in the browser and you click on these things, it will give you audio and image, which will pop up. The reason I've got the template of slides is one of the things that took me a long time to figure out was how can I make a 360 image out of a flat image? And what I did was, it took a little while, but if you actually use this exact template, it seems crazy, but just trust me, and it's a weird size. Like this font size is, I think if I put a text box in here, if I show you the text box there, that font size is 14. I'm not sure you can see that just to give you an idea of how big this sheet of paper is, this slide is. I'm now on font size 48, and you're just starting to see it. So this is a huge slide, but the reason is because I need it to fold. Anything in this area here, in between the area of distortion, if I put any of these pictures, so imagine this is student work, by the way, this is some student artwork. Anything I put within this area, and then I go to File, and I need to leave everything else blank, by the way. I go to File and download as a JPEG. What I can do with that JPEG is, I'll do save, and then go into my tour. I'm going to add a new scene. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to upload. So I can upload my own 360 or 360 images, but I can also upload flat images using that template I've just shown you. As long as my images are within that kind of zone between the two distortion pieces, what will happen, it doesn't look great right now, but trust me, is when I add it in to the scene, what I get is this kind of effect. Wow, so I can essentially pretend, mic drop, is that a mic drop? I can essentially pretend I'm in a gallery, and I could then get kids to add their point of interest. I could get kids to drop in audio describing their artwork. Obviously, you want to take away where it says, you want to delete where it says online area of distortion, an area of distortion. But what that's done is it's wrapped that flat image into an internal sphere that you can then kind of go through. And the beauty is you can then publish them, and they're then available on the web, so people can go at them on their phone and look at them in kind of VR if they've got a viewer, or they can access them on the web and just drag through them. So a really, really quick version of Tour Creator, all of the instructions you need, and thank you again to Donnie for the amazing work he did on creating these videos. They're all on here on this website, which I'll drop into the chat in just a second.
Yeah, no, I have not seen you do that before, and I was like, it's not going to work, and it totally works. I love it. What I want to share, Chris, that the Street View app, if you have the Street View app for your phone, then you can actually, in the bottom right hand corner, so Street View app, you have to, if you have an iPad, you have to download the other what am I trying to say? The other app, like the iPhone app. But yeah, if you go down and you can actually click on this button, you can actually start taking 360-degree photos with this Street View app. And it's there you go, thank you. And it just looks really, really cool. And it's really easy. Just the Street View app, just in the bottom right hand corner, you just click on that, and you can start taking your own photos. So if your phone doesn't already do it, but it just sort of needs to have what do they call that? Like a I don't know, something that just sort of keeps an eye on where placement is.
It's the accelerometer thing, right?
Accelerometer. There you go. That sounds like a cartoon name, but it's good. And yeah, I would definitely recommend that. And I think, Chris, when you're sharing this, imagine kids going and taking a picture of their entire family, and then putting sound bites on top of grandpa telling his story, about like, one of my favorite things in life or something like that. I think there's real opportunity to kind of get kids to connect themselves to this and talk about their place, especially kids who are maybe first generation, and then be able to kind of tell that story, because a lot of times these first generation kids, they disconnect from their past because it's so important for them to be connected to the present, right? And it's such a cool feature. I'm just gonna fix that camera. And it's great, good stuff. We're gonna put that in the chat, yeah?
It'll be there in any minute now. So I think we're going to jump across to you, buddy, right? And we're going to finish off with arts and culture.
Yeah, I only have 5 minutes to talk about it, but I'm going to take 25. So
okay.
No.
Settle in, people.
So Maps is back for me, and I just want to share a way to get into my next topic, which is arts and culture. One of my favorite things, and I discovered this by accident, Chris, is that if I drop Pegman in a place like a museum or like a palace, in this case, this is the Palace of Versailles, and I drop Pegman into this sort of place, I can immediately enter into this palace, right? And so you probably know this from the hall. This is the Hall of Mirrors. So I'm in Google Maps, and I just dropped Pegman in where I was before, and I can move around. So I'm just going to kind of walk around this palace here, and we can cut through the Queen's chamber into another room over here, and then into another room, and just sort of look around and sort of, oh, this is really opulent and all that jazz. But when I get into rooms like this that have really incredible art pieces, you get this little circle. Now, by the way, I had played around with this before, and you're able to walk around some incredible museums, right? So like think about going to Canberra to the Australian War Memorial and walking around those hallways. And then every once in a while, you'll see an image on the wall like this, and you can click on it, and actually it'll open up this side panel that allows you to talk about that image. And then more importantly is I can actually go into this. Let me see if I can just click on this here, this link down here that says view more. And then it takes me to Google's arts and culture. So it's artsandculture.google.com. So the word "and" A-N-D is actually written out, artsandculture.google.com. And it takes me into this where I can explore images that I saw in the castle, right? And so, for example, when I click on something like this one, knowing the castle where I was, if you didn't see the name, we can make assumptions about who this woman is, right? And we know this, perhaps this is Marie Antoinette. And then what I love about arts and culture is just the ability to kind of ask questions, right? Like we know this is Marie Antoinette, and these are her children, right? It's like, oh, she had children? What? And then we come over here and we see the Dauphine. I think that's what we say, right? The Dauphine, Chris, right? The son, right? Say yes. And here we see him just sort of pointing out this bassinet, and it's empty, and he wants you to notice it. And so why do we know that? Do you know why, Chris, that bassinet is empty? If I lost you, you lost me. All right, we're still with me. Okay, Chris, you're not answering me, but I'm
sorry. I actually muted because my own 6-month-old baby was starting to laugh as his brother came in really loudly, and I can't hear it. I don't know if you can hear it now, but anyway, sorry. Yes, I don't know. Tell me.
I love it. So when we look at this, we actually can just ask questions. And what I love even more is as you scroll down, all of this content about this painting and about history is written in here for so many great places, for so many great pieces of art. And then way down here on the bottom, especially for this piece, is a video in French and in English that talk about Marie Antoinette, the history of Marie Antoinette, and about the artist Lebrun herself, and about why she painted Marie Antoinette in this way, and really just to quickly point out, it's ultimately we're painting Marie Antoinette as a mother and not as the party queen, right? So it's really a propaganda piece, and I love this sort of thing because you find inside of arts and culture, and so another wonderful thing that I love about this is that we can come in here, and I'll see if I can just pull this up for us, is we can find works of art that are inside here, like this chateau, right? Do you know this chateau
It's just outside, yeah, just outside of Paris.
I love it. So, and we can look at it and we can see this incredible garden, right? And we can see these beautiful fountains back here. But then what I would love to do is see like, wow, what does that look like now? Well, Google Maps, actually you can go into Google Maps and take a look at it. And let's see, I had this load up. Here it is now, right? And so take a look at those beautiful fountains now, Chris.
Like, where have they gone?
Yeah, but you can see the shapes that still exist from where those fountains used to be that potentially you wouldn't be able to see if you were on the ground. And it's such a cool comparison, right? Like what do things look like now versus what they look like prior to photographs? And so being able to incorporate geography and history into that combination of Google Arts and Culture paintings and maps, right?
You're like an archaeologist, Jim. You're like a forensic archaeologist. That's amazing. I've never seen that.
I was thinking that, and it's I love this. I love digging around. You need to have time to spend and look at arts and culture. You know, the thing about arts and culture, and I'll just quickly share, is there's a whole bunch of paintings in here that they've captured in gigapixels. So you know Van Gogh's famous, and I'll just sort of quickly show Starry Night, right? So I can go into Van Gogh's Starry Night, but because a lot of these paintings are in gigapixel, we can literally zoom in all the way to the canvas, and as it loads up, you can see that almost what potentially is on purpose, that Van Gogh is using the canvas as paint, right? But we could also make assumptions about Van Gogh at that time, because this is his view from his room in the asylum, as we would call it then, we know that his state of mind might have been more erratic. He might have been painting more vigorously and just missed spots, and it didn't matter to him. And I love that sort of dig in and to explore. And then the last thing I'll share about Google Arts and Culture is its ability for you to come in here and just type in something like Canberra. You know, with a lot of the museums potentially opening up soon, I can go to something like Canberra and look at pieces of art that relate to Canberra, but potentially are in museums in Canberra. Because I always say that museums are galleries of place, right? And you can ultimately find out things about that. But here we can see this Ned Kelly painting. We can see lots of different things that explore the history of Australia using through the museums. And a lot of it is it just really captures history from the point of view of those museum folks, right? Anyways, lots to share with there. But lastly, I just want to quickly share with you. You can go in here and search lots of things, like maybe, for example, you want to look at Nelson Mandela, the struggle of Nelson Mandela in South Africa, apartheid, and they have beautiful things here from his museum Center of Memory. And this, for example, is the letter to Zinni and Zinzi, his daughters. And I just want to quickly point out, I can zoom in here and I can see the actual written word of Nelson Mandela. And in this letter, he says, once again, our beloved mummy has been arrested and is now she and daddy are away in jail. My heart bleeds as I think of her sitting in some police station. Is crossed out, Chris, and it's replaced with the word cell. And then if you move down, she says she perhaps alone, without anybody to talk to and with nothing to read. And when I look at something like that, Chris, I can't help but wonder, this is experience talking, that a troublesome piece for somebody to go to jail would be the ability to not be able to talk to anybody, and certainly to sit in that cell without anything to read. And it's and that's experience talking, right? And you know, as you think about how he would phrase these things to his daughters, really, it's just about living through that perspective. And there's so much in here, Chris, that I wish I had more time to explore. But I'll leave it at that. Go in there, spend some time playing. And all of you out there, I think you'll be really fascinated with the ability to create zoom-in thinking routines, the ability to zoom into the famous works of art, and of course, explore museums by looking in here for the Street View icon. Usually it'll sit there if they've explored that museum. So, and with that, zip it. Here's that button there. So
I love that, Jim. It's such a powerful place.
Yeah.
I always find the challenge in there is it can be a little bit of a rabbit hole. So you kind of start on something, and then you go dum 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 dum, and just keep exploring and get lost in there, right? Which is a great thing to do.
But there's so much beauty in being lost inside of culture, right?
Absolutely. I'm just gonna. Thanks for that, George. I just want to let everyone know that we are having a few issues on our side with the comments. So we're not able to push out comments just now. So I have added I did a quick bit.ly link, and I'll make sure that works. I haven't really double checked it yet. A quick bit.ly link to that Tour Creator website. So bit.ly/Tour Creator Vic is there. All right.
Thanks, guys. I know that that was really hard for you to stop. So I just want to acknowledge up front that I'm super impressed that you did. And I know on the dot, you are supposed to allow a few minutes for feedback at the end, but that's okay. Maybe we'll get it right one day. If you have joined us live, or even if you are watching this in a repeat, we do really, really appreciate your feedback. We do believe it is a gift, and I am going to try and guilt trip you all into doing it by saying thank you very much in advance for jumping onto that website and actually filling that in for us. It really helps us to ensure that we can bring people like Chris and Jim into these sort of spaces to share their absolute wealth of knowledge with this community. So please do jump onto bit.ly/VIC DET Webinars and share your feedback about it. And I can see, thank you to those who are putting it in the chat right now as well. As that is happening, I will say that this is the last of our webinars for VIC DET that will have Chris and Jim joining us. And we do have one remaining next week, which we're going to be looking at inclusive technologies and a whole range of different accessibility features that are built into both G Suite and Chromebooks. And because Chris and Jim have done such an amazing job, and of course, you know, I know that they're amazing educators. For next week's webinar, I've actually invited along another amazing educator. Absolute wealth of knowledge on everything to do with inclusive technologies, has decades of experience working in that space. And so I will be co-facilitating with him next week, which means that Chris and Jim, this is our last webinar with the two of you for this particular series. And so I did want to take the moment to say thank you very much. You know, I've worked with both of you for a long time, but every time I have the opportunity, I learn a lot. And I know that the deliberate choice for the two of you to co-facilitate this when you could have split the tasks up was really a really fabulous way of modeling really successful team teaching. And I know that everybody who has jumped in and watched this over this series so far has absolutely benefited from your knowledge. So thank you to both of you for all of your efforts behind the scenes to make this awesome. And you can see that there's people in the chat literally crying. So.
Lisa is Devo. She is like totally devastated. Lisa, I'm sorry. Listen,
we don't exist. We don't cease to exist at the end of this.
No, you don't cease to exist, and both Chris and Jim are available for other people to work with beyond this webinar as well. So I think you guys have your contact details that if you want to throw them. Chris,
Kimberly, can I share something with everybody on this next slide that Google has offered to subsidize tickets to a level 2 Google certified educator course that we're running at Deploy Learning. So if you wanted to head over to that website, Google's subsidizing tickets. And so you can ultimately take a lot of the things that you learned from this webinar series and apply that towards an actual Google certified educator certification. So take a look at it. If that's something that's interesting to you, just give us a shout, and we'll be happy to help work that out.
And Jim, that's a full course, right? It's not just just doing the exam. It's a full like supported piece.
That's right.
Congratulations to Heather, by the way, who's just come up on the chat there, who has passed her level 1 exam. So we expect to see you in this Deploy level 2 training. Hopefully, Heather.
That's right.
Good on you. Well done,
it's so good. Yeah, we saw Heather already signed up. It's great.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. Chris and Jim, will you just at least plug for me how good the guest that I brought on for next week is? Because you both know him very well.
I don't like him at all. I don't know who you're talking about.
Most of you have worked with him quite a lot as well, and he is fabulous. And can you just reassure everyone that he will also be great?
No, he is amazing. And the reason that our egos are stepping off the screen is because there is only one other person who would be better than us, Jim, in the world, and that would be Greg. So
that's hard to admit.
That would be me, Chris. Wasn't that me?
And Kimberly.
That's why you're fired. Yes. We should stop the recording. Thank you very much once again for joining us. Please do fill in that feedback form. We appreciate it. Good luck. I know in Victoria we're in a really interesting time in terms of transitioning back to school. And from all of us, we are just so immensely proud to be involved in education and have the opportunity to support you in any way throughout this completely unprecedented time in the world. And so good luck with everything, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you back next week for the final in this particular series, but not the final webinar we'll be doing ever for VIC DET. So stay tuned for an announcement for some term 3 webinars, hopefully coming out soon as well. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks, Chris and Jim, again.
Bye. Good luck, guys.